Okay, let's dive right into this. In a world that is just constantly demanding our attention, where arguments break out in comment sections every 5 seconds and global tensions feel overwhelmingly high, we usually look for really complex, high-tech solutions to find peace. But what if the actual blueprint for world peace is over 2.5 millennia old? Today we're unpacking a fascinating explainer based on the Cūḷagosiṅga Sutta, an ancient text from the Pali Canon. We're going to look closely at exactly what this profound source tells us, because it shows how a highly localized, incredibly quiet interaction actually holds the ultimate blueprint for lasting world peace.
So, you might be wondering, and it's a completely fair question, how on earth can a conversation held in a perfectly quiet, isolated forest 2,500 years ago hold the blueprint for world peace in our hyper-connected, incredibly fast-paced AI era? I mean, it seems totally counterintuitive, right? We're so used to peace treaties drafted by hundreds of diplomats or complex algorithms designed to moderate our online behavior. But this text, it suggests a completely different, almost radical approach. It lays out a framework that starts astonishingly small, literally with just 3 individuals, but ends up vibrating across the entire cosmos. It is a literal masterclass in how micro-level harmony creates macro-level peace.
To truly grasp how this blueprint works, we first have to conceptually leave all our relentless noise and constant notifications behind. Just imagine, for a second, stepping out of all that daily chaos and walking into the absolute, undisturbed tranquility of the Gosiṅga Sal wood in ancient India. We're talking about a sanctuary of total silence. According to the source, the Buddha himself decided to visit this specific forest to see 3 particular monks residing there. And this sets up a fundamental truth right out of the gate. We absolutely cannot cultivate profound external peace if our internal environment is just constantly being bombarded. We really have to understand the power of an undisturbed, focused environment as the essential foundation for everything else that follows.
Now get this. To give you an idea of just how intense and protected this peace was, the text introduces us to these 3 monks, Anuruddha, Nandiya, and Kimbila. Their sanctuary was actually so fiercely guarded that when the Buddha himself showed up, the local forest keeper literally tried to turn him away. I mean, can you imagine trying to bounce the Buddha from a forest? The keeper pleaded with him not to disturb these 3 men, basically saying, hey, they are perfectly focused on their spiritual goals right now, please don't ruin it. It actually took Anuruddha hearing the commotion to step in and respectfully welcome their teacher. Just think about that. They had cultivated a state of peace so tangible, so incredibly precious, that a bystander was fiercely guarding it from any outside disruption whatsoever.
So the Buddha finally sits down with them, and he asks a very direct question. Are you living in harmony, without disputes? And their answer, which comes straight from the text, is just this beautiful, really visceral metaphor. They told him they were blending like milk and water, looking at each other with affectionate eyes. Think about the actual physics of milk and water for a second. When you mix them together, you literally cannot tell where the water ends and the milk begins, right? They become a single, completely unified substance. These monks weren't just putting up with each other to get by. They had achieved a total, seamless interpersonal unity. That is the ultimate goal of the blueprint. But the obvious question for us is, how exactly did they pull off this incredible state?
Well, the core of their success comes down to what is essentially the ultimate collaboration hack, the ego drop. Anuruddha explains to the Buddha that his daily practice is to completely set aside his own mind. He drops his own desires, his preferences, his ego, the whole shebang, and acts entirely according to the minds of his 2 companions. And astonishingly, Nandiya and Kimbila were doing the exact same thing right back. They literally told the Buddha, our bodies are different, but our minds are as if one. By systematically prioritizing the well-being and the preferences of each other over their own individual egos, they just completely eliminated the very root of conflict. What we should really take away from this is that true harmony requires a radical, active surrender of selfishness.
But this wasn't just some abstract philosophical idea. They brought this into their daily physical reality. Their peaceful living was highly systematized into a rigorous, entirely silent routine. The text details that whoever returned from collecting alms first would prep the seats and the water. Whoever returned last would eat any leftovers or safely discard the food where it wouldn't harm wildlife and then clean up. And here's my favorite detail. If a water pot was too heavy for one person to lift, they didn't shout for help. No, they simply used hand signals to call another monk over, and they lifted it together without breaking their silence. Then, every 5th day, they'd sit up all night discussing the Dharma. It's an absolute masterclass in silent, friction-free teamwork.
But their harmony went way beyond just splitting the physical chores. They systematically elevated their minds together too.
When the Buddha asked about their progress, they laid out an ascent through the 4 foundational states of meditation, the jhanas. Step by step, they systematically stripped away worldly desires, settling their internal thoughts into this deep, quiet seclusion. And as they moved deeper, even feelings of joy faded into pure mindfulness. Ultimately, they reached a state of pure equanimity, completely free from both pain and pleasure. They were literally training their minds, shedding layers of ego until they became completely unshakable.
And they didn't even stop at those foundational states. They pushed their minds to the absolute limit, climbing into what the text calls the immaterial realms. They shifted their focus from infinite space to infinite consciousness, into the realm of nothingness, and incredibly, a state of neither perception nor non-perception. Finally, they reached the absolute pinnacle, the complete cessation of feeling and perception. Through pure wisdom, their mental impurities were entirely destroyed. They had systematically dismantled every possible mental trigger that could ever cause suffering or conflict. Upon hearing this, the Buddha praised them incredibly highly, basically confirming that there is absolutely no state more excellent or refined than this.
Okay, what happens after the Buddha leaves is truly remarkable, and it highlights just how incredibly deep this connection went. The other 2 monks turn to Anuruddha and basically ask, "Hey, did we ever actually tell you about our meditative achievements? Like, how did you know to tell the Buddha we had reached these stages?" Amazingly, they had never once bragged or spoken to each other about these profound successes. Anuruddha simply replied that he hadn't been told through words. He knew because he had literally read their minds, completely understanding their mental states. On top of that, divine beings, or devas, had also confirmed these achievements to him. It's completely mind-blowing, right? It shows that when egos are truly dropped, communication completely transcends words. The truth was just understood through a pure, untainted mental connection.
Now here is where the blueprint truly scales up, from the micro to the macro. A spirit named Dighaparjana was so moved by what he had just witnessed that he praised the monks directly to the Buddha. And suddenly, this sparked a literal cosmic chain reaction. The earth spirits heard this praise and echoed it. Then, the celestial beings of the 4 great kings heard it and passed it up. The signal of their localized peace went instantly viral. It broadcasted upward, realm by realm, from Tavatimsa to Yama, all the way up to the highest Brahma realms. In an instant, the profound harmony of just 3 silent monks sitting in a forest was known across the entire cosmos. Talk about a ripple effect.
And that brings us to the Buddha's final, incredibly sweeping declaration. He confirmed this universal ripple effect, stating that whenever a family remembers these 3 monks and their method with faith, it brings them long-lasting happiness. But he deliberately doesn't stop at the family level. He scales it way up. He says if a village, a nation, all leaders, or literally the entire world, including all humans and celestial beings, focuses on this example of dropping the ego and prioritizing collective harmony, it will bring lasting peace and happiness to the entire world. It proves that this hyper-localized harmony is, in fact, a perfectly scalable blueprint. True peace doesn't start from the top down. It radiates outwards from the quiet, unified actions of individuals. The contrast between the silent Gosiṅga forest and our incredibly loud digital lives is stark, for sure. But here's the thing, the human mind remains exactly the same. The practice of setting aside your own mind isn't about losing your identity or being a pushover. It's about deeply collaborating, actively listening, and just letting go of that desperate need to always be right. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. In your family, in your workplace, or in literally your very next digital interaction, how can you practice this ego drop today? How can you initiate your own cosmic ripple effect in our noisy world? The blueprint is 2.5 millennia old, but the next move is entirely yours.